The morning sun cast long shadows across Fort Liberty as Staff Sergeant Maria Santos adjusted her long-sleeved uniform for the third time, carefully ensuring every inch of her intricate tattoo remained hidden beneath the regulation fabric. 28 years old, with 15 years of mixed martial arts training and 3 tours in Afghanistan behind her, Maria had learned to navigate the delicate balance between military protocol and personal identity. Her left arm bore a masterpiece that told a story most would never understand: a detailed phoenix rising from flames that intertwined with military dog tags, each tag bearing the name of a fallen comrade she had personally carried to safety during her deployment. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The artwork stretched from her shoulder to her wrist, every line and shadow crafted by a renowned artist in Denver who specialized in memorial pieces for veterans. The phoenix's wings incorporated the coordinates of 3 different battlefields where Maria had distinguished herself, not through conventional heroics, but through an extraordinary ability to locate and extract wounded soldiers under impossible circumstances. Her callsign among the Special Operations community wasn't her rank or last name, it was Compass, because she could find anyone, anywhere, even when GPS failed and traditional search methods had been exhausted. But today, as she prepared for her new assignment with the 82nd Airborne Division's Elite Search and Rescue Unit, Maria felt the familiar weight of judgment that had followed her throughout her military career. The detailed tattoo represented 5 years of her life, countless hours of pain, and a financial investment that had cost her nearly $8,000 from her deployment savings. More importantly, it represented the 17 soldiers whose lives she had saved during 3 separate incidents that had earned her 2 Bronze Stars and a Purple Heart, decorations that remained classified due to the sensitive nature of the operations. Lieutenant Colonel David Park stood at the front of the briefing room, his weathered face scanning the assembled soldiers with the intensity of someone who had spent 22 years evaluating human potential under pressure. The 82nd Airborne's newest search and rescue unit represented the cream of military talent, 12 hand-selected specialists who would be responsible for locating and extracting personnel in the most dangerous environments imaginable. Each soldier had been chosen not just for their technical skills, but for their ability to function as a cohesive unit when conventional rescue operations failed. "Ladies and gentlemen," Park began, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had commanded respect in 3 different combat zones. "Today we integrate our final team member. Staff Sergeant Maria Santos comes to us with an exemplary service record and specialized training that will enhance our operational capabilities." He paused, noting the subtle shift in body language among the assembled soldiers. She'd be joining us from the 75th Ranger Regiment, where she served with distinction in Afghanistan. The reaction was immediate and predictable. Master Sergeant Kyle Thompson, a 34-year-old veteran from Alabama with traditional military values, exchanged a knowing look with Sergeant First Class Mike Rodriguez, whose own conservative background made him skeptical of anyone who didn't fit the conventional military mold. The unit had developed a tight-knit culture over the past 6 months, and the introduction of a new member, particularly a female soldier with an unknown background, created an undercurrent of tension that Park had anticipated. Santos has completed advanced survival training, combat medical certification, and holds expert ratings in mountaineering and urban warfare. Park continued, deliberately emphasizing her qualifications. Her previous unit commander described her as one of the most resourceful soldiers he'd ever commanded, with an exceptional ability to locate personnel in challenging environments. What Park couldn't mention due to classification levels, was that Maria's resourcefulness had saved the lives of soldiers who had been written off as casualties by conventional rescue teams. When Maria entered the briefing room, her presence commanded immediate attention. She moved with the controlled confidence of someone who had proven herself in life or death situations, her uniform impeccable, her bearing professional. But it was impossible to miss the long sleeves that extended past regulation length, a detail that Thompson noticed immediately. In the military culture of the 82nd Airborne, where shorts and t-shirts were common during physical training, long sleeves in 90-degree weather stood out like a beacon. "Staff Sergeant Santos," Park announced, "meet your new team." The introductions proceeded with military efficiency, each soldier offering the standard courtesies while privately assessing the new arrival. Maria responded with appropriate respect, her handshake firm, her eye contact direct. She had learned long ago that first impressions in military units were crucial, and she was determined to establish herself as a professional soldier rather than a curiosity. Thompson, however, was already forming opinions. As the unit's senior, non-commissioned officer, he had developed strong views about military appearance standards and the importance of maintaining traditional values within elite units. When he noticed Maria's consistent preference for long sleeves during their initial equipment inspection, his curiosity began to shift toward suspicion. "Santos," he said during a brief break in the proceedings, "you planning to train in long sleeves when we're doing PT in this heat?" "I'll adapt to unit standards, Sergeant," Maria replied evenly, recognizing the challenge underlying his question. She had faced similar scrutiny throughout her career, and she had learned to navigate these waters carefully. "My previous unit had different protocols, but I'm here to integrate with your team's established procedures." Rodriguez, who had overheard the exchange, joined the conversation with a skeptical expression. "Different protocols about what, exactly?" "We're all infantry here, Santos. We've all served in the same army." His tone carried the implication that Maria's previous experience might not measure up to the standards of their elite unit. The tension was subtle but unmistakable. Maria understood that she was being evaluated not just as a soldier, but as an outsider whose presence might disrupt the unit's established chemistry. She had anticipated this resistance, but she had also learned that the best approach was to demonstrate her capabilities through performance rather than confrontation. "I understand the importance of unit cohesion," she said carefully. "Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I'm here to contribute to the mission, not to create complications." Park, observing the interaction from across the room, recognized the familiar dynamics of military integration. He had seen similar situations countless times throughout his career, and he knew that the success of the unit would depend on how quickly these initial tensions could be resolved. Maria's service record was exceptional, but records meant nothing if the team couldn't function effectively together. The first week of training revealed the complexity of Maria's situation. During physical training sessions, she consistently outperformed most of the unit in endurance and strength exercises, her years of martial arts training evident in her fluid movements and controlled breathing. But her insistence on wearing long sleeves during PT drew increasingly pointed comments from Thompson and Rodriguez, who began to speculate about what she might be hiding. "Maybe she's got some kind of medical condition," Rodriguez suggested during a private conversation with Thompson. "Or maybe she's covering up something that wouldn't look good on a security clearance review." The speculation was fueled by Maria's consistent deflection of questions about her previous assignments, which she explained were classified but couldn't discuss in detail. Thompson's suspicions deepened when he noticed Maria's reluctance to participate in the unit's traditional bonding activities. When the team gathered for informal gatherings after training, Maria would appear briefly, make appropriate social gestures, and then excuse herself politely. This pattern reinforced his belief that she was hiding something significant, something that might compromise the unit's effectiveness. The breaking point came during the second week when the unit was conducting equipment preparation for an upcoming training exercise. Maria had rolled up her sleeves slightly while working on her gear, revealing just a small portion of the detailed artwork on her forearm. Staff Sergeant Jennifer Walsh, the unit's communications specialist, caught a glimpse of the intricate design and mentioned it to Thompson during their break. "Did you see Santos's arm?" Walsh asked, her tone carrying more curiosity than judgment. "She's got some kind of detailed tattoo work under those sleeves. Must be pretty extensive if she's going to such lengths to keep it covered." Thompson's reaction was immediate and predictable. In his view, extensive tattoos represented a lack of military bearing and professional judgment. "I knew there was something," he said, his voice carrying satisfaction at having his suspicions validated. "Probably some kind of gang-related artwork. Or inappropriate imagery. That's why she's been hiding it." The speculation spread through the unit with the speed typical of military gossip. By the end of the day, half the team had developed theories about Maria's tattoo, ranging from inappropriate political imagery to connections with criminal organizations. The fact that Maria continued to deflect questions about her previous assignments only fueled the speculation, creating an atmosphere of suspicion that began to affect the unit's cohesion. Rodriguez, emboldened by the growing consensus, decided to confront Maria directly. "Santos," he said during equipment maintenance, "we're all wondering about the artwork you're hiding under those sleeves. This is a tight unit, and we need to trust each other completely. If you've got something that might affect security clearances or unit reputation, we need to know about it." Maria's response was measured but firm. "My tattoo is personal, Sergeant. It doesn't affect my ability to perform my duties or my security clearance status. I'd prefer to keep my personal life separate from my professional responsibilities." She continued working on her equipment, but Rodriguez could see the tension in her shoulders, the controlled breathing that suggested she was managing her emotions carefully. "That's not how elite units work," Thompson interjected, joining the conversation. "We don't keep secrets from each other. If you've got gang affiliations or inappropriate imagery, it reflects on all of us. The unit's reputation is built on trust and shared standards." The accusation hung in the air like a physical presence. Maria felt the familiar surge of anger that had accompanied similar confrontations throughout her career, but she had learned to channel that energy into controlled responses. "I can assure you that my tattoo doesn't represent gang affiliations or inappropriate imagery," she said, her voice steady despite the provocation. "It's personal memorial work that honors my service." But Thompson wasn't satisfied with her explanation. "Memorial work that you're ashamed to show your fellow soldiers? That doesn't add up, Santos. If it's honorable military memorial work, why the secrecy? Why not share it with the people you're supposed to trust with your life?" The question struck at the heart of Maria's dilemma. Her tattoo wasn't something she was ashamed of. It was something she was proud of, something that represented the most meaningful experiences of her military career. But it was also something that would inevitably lead to questions about classified operations, about experiences that she couldn't discuss without violating security protocols. More importantly, it would reveal the extent of her combat experience, which might create expectations or judgments that could complicate her integration with the unit. "Some experiences are difficult to explain," Maria said finally, her voice carrying a note of finality that should have ended the conversation. "I've served with honor, and that should be sufficient." But Thompson had already made up his mind. Over the following days, he began to poison the unit's atmosphere with increasingly pointed comments about Maria's secretive behavior and her inappropriate body art. He suggested that someone who couldn't be transparent about their personal choices might not be trustworthy in combat situations. The speculation grew more elaborate, with some unit members suggesting that Maria's tattoo might violate military appearance regulations or represent connections to extremist organizations. The situation reached a crisis point during the third week, when the unit was preparing for their first major training exercise together. Park had designed the exercise to test their ability to work as a cohesive team under pressure. But the underlying tensions about Maria's tattoo had created an atmosphere of suspicion that threatened to undermine the entire training program. During the pre-exercise briefing, Thompson made a decision that would change everything. "Sir," he said, addressing Park directly, "I believe we need to address Staff Sergeant Santos's tattoo situation before we proceed with team exercises. The unit has concerns about her transparency and her commitment to military standards." Park's expression hardened. He had hoped that the unit would resolve their integration issues through professional interaction, but Thompson's public challenge represented a direct threat to unit cohesion. "Sergeant Thompson," he said, his voice carrying unmistakable authority, "Staff Sergeant Santos's appearance is within military regulations, and her personal choices are not subject to unit approval." "With respect, sir," Thompson persisted, "extensive body art can reflect judgment issues that might affect operational security. If Santos won't share the nature of her tattoo with her fellow soldiers, how can we trust her with classified information or life-or-death decisions?" The challenge was direct and public, creating a situation that Park couldn't ignore. Maria sat silently, her jaw clenched, recognizing that her career with this unit hung in the balance. She had faced similar situations before, but never with such high stakes. The search and rescue unit represented the pinnacle of her military aspirations, and the growing controversy threatened to derail everything she had worked to achieve. Park looked at Maria with an expression that mixed professional concern with personal sympathy. "Santos," he said carefully, "I'm not requiring you to reveal personal information, but if there are aspects of your background that might affect unit cohesion, this might be an appropriate time to address them." Maria felt the weight of 17 fallen soldiers, the memory of 3 separate battlefields, and the accumulated pain of 5 years of memorial artwork pressing against her chest. She could end the speculation immediately by revealing the truth, but doing so would expose classified operations and create new complications that might be worse than the current situation. More importantly, it would reduce the most meaningful experiences of her military career to a spectacle for people who had already demonstrated their willingness to judge without understanding. "Sir," she said, her voice steady despite the emotional turmoil, "my tattoo is personal memorial work that honors fallen soldiers. It doesn't violate any regulations, and it doesn't compromise my ability to serve effectively. I'd prefer to let my performance speak for itself." But Thompson wasn't finished. "Memorial work that you're ashamed to show fellow soldiers? That doesn't make sense, Santos. If it's honorable military memorial work, why not share it with people who would understand and respect it? Unless it's not what you claim it is." The implication was clear and insulting. Maria felt the familiar surge of anger that had accompanied similar confrontations throughout her career, but this time the stakes were higher. Her silence was being interpreted as guilt, her privacy as deception. The unit she had hoped to serve with distinction was actively questioning her integrity and her commitment to military values. Rodriguez, emboldened by Thompson's aggression, joined the attack. "We've all made sacrifices for our country, Santos. We've all lost people we cared about. But we don't hide our service behind mysterious tattoos and classified operations that nobody can verify. If you want to be part of this unit, you need to be transparent about who you are and what you represent." The accusation was devastating and fundamentally unfair. Maria's classified operations weren't mysterious. They were classified for legitimate security reasons. Her tattoo wasn't hidden out of shame. It was protected out of respect for the privacy of fallen soldiers and the sensitivity of the operations that had claimed their lives. But explaining these distinctions would require revealing information that she couldn't ethically or legally share. Park watched the confrontation with growing concern. He could see that Maria was being pushed toward a breaking point, but he also recognized that the unit's cohesion was fracturing along lines that might be irreparable. The training exercise was scheduled to begin in 6 hours, and the current level of tension would make effective teamwork impossible. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice carrying unmistakable authority, "this discussion is terminated. Staff Sergeant Santos's personal choices are not subject to unit approval, and her service record speaks for itself. We will proceed with the training. Exercise is planned, and I expect professional behavior from all personnel." But the damage was already done. As the unit dispersed to prepare for the exercise, the whispered conversations and speculative glances made it clear that Maria's integration had failed. Thompson and Rodriguez had succeeded in poisoning the unit's atmosphere, creating a situation where Maria's presence was seen as a liability rather than an asset. Maria spent the remaining hours before the exercise in isolation, checking and rechecking her equipment with the methodical precision that had kept her alive through 3 combat deployments. She understood that her career with this unit was effectively over, but she was determined to complete the training exercise with the professionalism that had defined her military service. The exercise was designed to test the unit's ability to locate and extract personnel in a challenging mountain environment. Teams would be inserted at different locations and given coordinates for simulated casualties who needed immediate evacuation. The successful completion of the exercise would demonstrate their readiness for actual combat operations, while failure would result in additional training requirements and potential reassignment of personnel. As the teams prepared for insertion, Maria found herself assigned to a 3-person team with Walsh and Corporal Danny Kim, a young soldier who had remained neutral during the tattoo controversy. The assignment was clearly intentional. Park had isolated her from Thompson and Rodriguez, while ensuring that she had capable teammates who might give her a fair opportunity to demonstrate her abilities. The helicopter insertion went smoothly, but the mountain terrain was more challenging than the briefing had suggested. Dense forest, steep slopes, and unpredictable weather combined to create conditions that would test even experienced soldiers. Maria's team was assigned to locate and extract a simulated casualty in a remote valley, a task that would require both navigation skills and physical endurance. As they began their descent into the valley, Maria felt the familiar focus that had sustained her through countless similar operations. The whispered conversations and speculative glances of the past 3 weeks faded into background noise as she concentrated on the mission requirements. This was what she had trained for, what she excelled at, and what had earned her the callsign compass among soldiers who understood the value of her unique abilities. But even as she focused on the immediate tactical requirements, Maria couldn't escape the knowledge that this exercise would likely be her last opportunity to prove herself with this unit. The controversy about her tattoo had created a situation where her professional future hung in the balance, and she was determined to demonstrate the capabilities that had made her legendary among the soldiers who had served with her in Afghanistan. The valley stretched before them like a green carpet, beautiful and deceptive in its apparent tranquility. Somewhere in that wilderness, a simulated casualty waited for extraction, and Maria's team had 6 hours to locate and evacuate their target. The success or failure of this mission would determine not just her immediate standing with the unit, but potentially the trajectory of her entire military career. As they disappeared into the forest, Maria carried with her the weight of 17 fallen soldiers, the memory of 3 separate battlefields, and the accumulated expectations of a military career that had been defined by extraordinary achievements under impossible circumstances. The tattoo that had caused so much controversy remained hidden beneath her regulation sleeves, but the capabilities it represented were about to be tested in ways that would change everything. The dense forest canopy filtered the morning sunlight into dappled patterns that shifted constantly as the team moved deeper into the valley. Maria's instincts kicked in immediately, her years of experience in hostile terrain allowing her to read the landscape in ways that her teammates couldn't fully appreciate. While Walsh consulted her GPS device and Kim checked his compass bearing, Maria was already identifying natural navigation markers, wind patterns, and subtle signs that would guide their search long after their electronic equipment failed. Within the first hour of their descent, Maria noticed discrepancies between the terrain features shown on their maps and the actual geography they were encountering. The valley was deeper than indicated, with hidden ravines and unexpected cliff faces that could trap unwary searchers or provide concealment for their target. More concerning was the weather pattern developing overhead, dark clouds gathering, with the kind of intensity that promised severe storms before the day ended. "Team Alpha, this is base," Park's voice crackled through their radio equipment. "Weather services are reporting potential severe thunderstorms in your operational area. Lightning risk is elevated, and visibility may be compromised within the next 3 hours. Maintain communication protocols and be prepared for emergency extraction if conditions deteriorate." Walsh exchanged worried glances with Kim as they absorbed the implications of the weather warning. Neither had extensive experience with search operations under severe weather conditions, and the prospect of locating their target while dealing with lightning, heavy rain, and reduced visibility added complexity that hadn't been covered in their briefing. Maria, however, continued moving forward with the steady confidence of someone who had operated under far worse conditions. "Santos," Walsh called, noting Maria's apparent unconcern about the weather warning. "Shouldn't we adjust our search pattern based on the storm forecast? If we get caught in the open during a lightning strike, this whole exercise becomes a lot more dangerous." Maria paused her forward movement and turned to address her teammates with an expression that combined professional assessment with hard-earned wisdom. "The weather adds urgency, but it doesn't change our fundamental approach. Our target is somewhere in this valley, probably in a location that provides natural shelter from the elements. The storm might actually work to our advantage by limiting the number of places where an injured person would seek protection." Her analysis was based on years of experience locating wounded soldiers under combat conditions, where weather was just one of many variables that could complicate rescue operations. She had learned to think like someone who was injured, scared, and seeking the safest possible shelter while waiting for help to arrive. This psychological insight, combined with her understanding of terrain features and survival principles, gave her advantages that conventional search training couldn't replicate. Kim, who had remained largely neutral during the tattoo controversy, found himself genuinely impressed by Maria's confidence and tactical thinking. "What kind of locations should we prioritize?" he asked, recognizing that Maria possessed expertise that could benefit their mission success. "Natural shelters that provide protection from both weather and potential threats," Maria replied, already scanning the valley for likely candidates. "Cave entrances, large rock overhangs, dense tree clusters that form natural windbreaks. Someone who's injured will instinctively seek locations that feel secure and defensible, even if the threat is purely simulated." As they continued their descent, Maria began demonstrating skills that went far beyond standard military training. She could read subtle changes in vegetation that indicated water sources, identify animal trails that might lead to natural shelters, and recognize geological formations that suggested hidden caves or protective overhangs. Her movement through the forest was fluid and silent, in stark contrast to Walsh and Kim, who crashed through underbrush with the typical noise of soldiers trained for conventional combat rather than stealth operations. The first indication that Maria possessed extraordinary capabilities came when she suddenly stopped their forward progress and held up a closed fist, the standard military signal for immediate halt. Walsh and Kim froze, straining their senses to detect whatever had triggered Maria's warning. For several long seconds, they heard nothing but normal forest sounds, bird calls, rustling leaves, distant water movement. "What is it?" Walsh whispered, her hand instinctively moving toward her weapon despite the training nature of their mission. Maria tilted her head slightly, her expression focused with an intensity that suggested she was processing sensory information that her teammates couldn't detect. "Human presence," she said quietly. "Someone passed through this area recently. Probably within the last 2 hours. The disturbance patterns in the vegetation and soil compression indicate movement that doesn't match natural wildlife patterns." Kim examined the area around their position, searching for the signs that Maria had detected. To his untrained eye, the forest looked completely undisturbed, with no obvious indication that anyone had passed through the location. "How can you tell?" he asked, genuinely curious about capabilities that seemed almost supernatural. Maria knelt beside a fallen log and pointed to subtle indications that would have been invisible to most observers. Broken spider webs at knee height, crushed moss patterns that follow a consistent directional flow, and soil compression that shows boot tread patterns if you know how to read the shadows. She stood and oriented herself according to the direction of the disturbance. Whoever passed through here was moving deliberately toward the eastern slope, probably seeking higher ground or natural shelter. The demonstration of tracking skills that bordered on the miraculous began to shift her teammates' perception of Maria's capabilities. Walsh found herself reconsidering her assumptions about the mysterious soldier, whose tattoo had generated so much controversy. If Maria possessed this level of field expertise, her previous assignments had clearly involved operations that required extraordinary specialized training. As they followed the trail that Maria had identified, the terrain became increasingly challenging. The eastern slope was steep and rocky, with loose stones that could trigger dangerous slides if disturbed carelessly. Maria navigated the hazards with practiced ease, selecting routes that minimized noise and maximized stability while maintaining their pursuit of the elusive trail markers. "Base, this is Team Alpha," Walsh reported through her radio. "We've identified signs of recent human passage and are following a trail toward the eastern slope. Request confirmation of other team positions to avoid interference with our search pattern." Park's response carried a note of surprise that he tried to conceal. "Team Alpha, you're the first unit to report definitive tracking information. Other teams are still conducting general search patterns in their assigned sectors. Maintain your current approach and report any significant developments." The radio communication crackled with similar reports from the other teams scattered throughout the training area. Team Bravo, led by Thompson, was struggling with navigation issues in dense forest terrain. Team Charlie, under Rodriguez's leadership, had covered significant ground, but found no trace of their assigned target. The contrast between their progress and Maria's team's rapid advancement was becoming increasingly apparent to everyone monitoring the exercise. Maria's tracking abilities continued to astound her teammates as they climbed higher into the mountains. She could determine not just the direction of travel, but also the approximate size and physical condition of the person they were following. Single individual, probably male based on stride length and boot size, moving with purpose rather than wandering randomly. No signs of injury or distress in the movement patterns, which suggests our target is mobile and making deliberate choices. About route selection. The psychological profile she was constructing proved accurate when they discovered their first major clue, a piece of torn fabric caught on a thorny bush near a natural rock shelter. The fabric matched the clothing description provided in their mission briefing, confirming that they were on the correct trail. More importantly, the location of the fabric suggested that their target explored the rock shelter, but ultimately rejected it as inadequate for long-term concealment. "Why would someone reject this shelter?" Kim asked, examining the rock formation that appeared to offer excellent protection from weather and observation. "It's dry, defensible, and well concealed from aerial observation." Maria studied the shelter with the analytical eye of someone who had evaluated countless similar positions under actual combat conditions. Too obvious, she concluded. Anyone conducting a systematic search would check natural shelters like this one first. Our target is thinking tactically, looking for a position that provides concealment while remaining accessible for rescue operations. Her analysis proved prescient. As they continued following the trail toward increasingly remote and challenging terrain, the person they were tracking was clearly experienced in survival techniques, selecting routes that balanced concealment with accessibility. This level of tactical thinking suggested that their target was either highly trained military personnel or someone with extensive outdoor survival experience. The storm that Park had warned about began to manifest as they reached the upper elevations of the valley. Dark clouds gathered overhead with ominous speed, and the wind began gusting through the trees with increasing intensity. Lightning flickered in the distance, accompanied by the rolling thunder that warned of approaching severe weather. "Team Alpha, this is base." Park's voice cut through the static with obvious concern. "Weather conditions are deteriorating rapidly. Lightning strikes have been reported in adjacent valleys, and we're implementing safety protocols for all teams. Prepare for possible emergency extraction if conditions become hazardous." Walsh looked nervously at the gathering storm, recognizing that their mission was about to become significantly more complicated. Lightning strikes in mountainous terrain represented a serious threat to personnel, and continuing their search under such conditions would violate basic safety protocols. But Maria showed no intention of abandoning their pursuit, despite the obvious dangers. "The storm will force our target to seek immediate shelter," Maria said, her voice carrying the calm authority of someone who had operated under far worse conditions. "This actually works to our advantage because it limits their options and makes their location more predictable. We need to identify the most likely shelter locations and reach them before the worst of the weather arrives." Her tactical analysis was brilliant and demonstrated thinking that went far beyond standard search and rescue protocols. While her teammates were focused on their own safety, Maria was using the adverse conditions as a tool to narrow their search parameters. This kind of advanced tactical thinking suggested experience with real-world operations where environmental conditions were variables to be exploited rather than obstacles to be avoided. The first lightning strike illuminated the valley with spectacular intensity, followed by thunder that echoed off the mountain walls like artillery fire. The storm was moving faster than the weather forecast had predicted, and the team found themselves in an increasingly dangerous situation. Standard military protocol called for immediate movement to safe positions when lightning activity reached this level of intensity. "Santos," Walsh said, her voice tight with concern, "we need to find shelter immediately. This level of electrical activity is beyond acceptable risk parameters for training exercises." But Maria was already moving toward a rock formation that she had identified as the most likely location for their target to seek shelter. "5 more minutes," she said, her voice carrying absolute confidence. "The trail indicators are getting stronger, and our target is definitely in this immediate area. The storm provides perfect cover for a final approach." Kim found himself torn between standard safety protocols and his growing confidence in Maria's tactical judgment. Her tracking abilities had been proven accurate throughout their search, and her analysis of terrain and tactical considerations had demonstrated expertise that far exceeded anything he had encountered in conventional military training. But the lightning strikes were becoming more frequent and more intense, creating conditions that threatened the safety of the entire team. The breakthrough came when Maria noticed subtle changes in the natural acoustics of their environment. The sound of their movements was being absorbed and reflected in patterns that suggested a large cavity or cave system nearby. Following these acoustic clues, she led her team to a carefully concealed cave entrance that would have been virtually impossible to locate without specialized tracking skills. "This is it," Maria said with quiet certainty. natural concealment, acoustic masking, multiple escape routes, and protection from both weather and observation. This is exactly where a tactically trained individual would establish a defensive position while waiting for rescue. The cave entrance was hidden behind a curtain of hanging vegetation and required careful navigation to access safely. As they approached the opening, Maria demonstrated infiltration techniques that spoke to specialized training far beyond standard military protocols. Her movements were silent and controlled, designed to avoid detection while maintaining tactical advantage. Inside the cave, they discovered their target, a role-playing instructor from the Special Forces Training Command who had been positioned to test the search capabilities of the various teams. The instructor's expression showed genuine surprise at being located so quickly and efficiently. "Outstanding work," he said, breaking character momentarily. "I've been running exercises like this for 8 years, and that was the most professional tracking and tactical approach I've ever witnessed." But the successful completion of their primary mission was overshadowed by the deteriorating weather conditions outside the cave. The storm had intensified beyond all predictions, with lightning strikes occurring every few seconds and rain falling in torrential sheets that threatened to trigger flash flooding in the valley below. The team was effectively trapped in the cave until the weather conditions improved enough to allow safe movement. "Base, this is Team Alpha," Walsh reported through her radio, fighting static interference from the electrical activity. "We have successfully located and reached our assigned target. However, we are weathered in at grid coordinates 347 to 892 due to severe lightning activity. Request guidance on extraction procedures." Park's response revealed the full scope of the crisis that was developing. Team Alpha acknowledged on-target acquisition. Be advised that weather conditions have exceeded safety parameters for helicopter operations. All extraction flights are suspended until conditions improve. Maintain position and wait for further instructions. The radio traffic from other teams painted a picture of widespread difficulties throughout the training area. Team Bravo was reporting navigation problems and had become separated from their target area during the storm. Team Charlie had taken shelter but lost radio contact with their assigned target. Several individual soldiers were reporting equipment failures and requesting emergency assistance. Maria listened to the radio chatter with growing concern, not for her own team's situation, but for the soldiers scattered throughout the valley who might be in genuine danger. The training exercise had evolved into a real emergency, with multiple teams facing potential life-threatening situations as the storm intensified beyond all weather predictions. "Base, this is Team Alpha," Maria said, taking the radio from Walsh. Despite protocols that designated team leaders as primary communicators, request permission to conduct search and assistance operations for teams experiencing difficulties. Our position provides tactical advantage for movement throughout the valley, and we have demonstrated capability for navigation under adverse conditions. Park's response was immediate and firm. "Negative, Team Alpha. All personnel are ordered to maintain safe positions until weather conditions permit organized extraction. Do not attempt movement under current lightning activity levels." But Maria's expression showed that she was already formulating plans that went beyond the limitations of standard military protocols. She had spent years operating in situations where official orders conflicted with tactical realities, and she possessed capabilities that could make the difference between successful rescue operations and potential casualties among the scattered teams. The instructor who had served as their target was monitoring radio communications with professional interest, noting the developing crisis and the various teams' responses to unexpected challenges. "Santos," he said, addressing Maria directly, "what's your assessment of the tactical situation developing in this valley?" Maria's response demonstrated strategic thinking that incorporated weather patterns, terrain analysis, and personnel capabilities in ways that suggested extensive Experience with complex rescue operations. Multiple teams are dealing with navigation and communication difficulties while scattered across challenging terrain during severe weather. Standard extraction protocols are compromised by helicopter flight restrictions, which means personnel recovery will require ground-based operations, coordinated from positions that maintain communication capability and tactical advantage. Her analysis was precisely accurate and revealed understanding of search and rescue operations that went far beyond standard military training. The instructor found himself increasingly impressed by capabilities that suggested specialized experience with real-world rescue operations under combat conditions. The crisis deepened when Team Bravo reported a medical emergency. Thompson's team had uncovered a genuine accident when one of their members slipped on rain-slicked rocks and suffered what appeared to be a serious leg injury. The injured soldier was immobilized in terrain that would be difficult to reach under ideal conditions, and the severe weather made conventional rescue operations impossible. "Base, this is Team Bravo." Thompson's voice carried obvious stress as he reported the emergency. "We have a serious medical situation requiring immediate evacuation. Private Johnson has suffered a possible fracture and is unable to move independently. Our position is exposed to lightning activity, but moving him could cause additional injury." Park's response revealed the limitations of conventional military protocols when faced with unexpected emergencies. Medical evacuation helicopters were grounded due to weather conditions, and ground-based rescue teams couldn't navigate the treacherous terrain safely during the electrical storm. The injured soldier was trapped in a location that standard rescue procedures couldn't reach. Maria listened to the emergency traffic with growing agitation, recognizing the situation where her specialized capabilities could save a soldier's life. She had faced similar emergencies during her combat deployments, where conventional rescue procedures had failed and unconventional approaches had been necessary to prevent casualties. "Walsh," she said, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to making life-and-death decisions, "I need you to maintain radio contact with base and coordinate with our instructor here. Kim and I are going to conduct reconnaissance of Team Bravo's position and assess rescue possibilities." Walsh's response was immediate and concerned. "Santos, we have direct orders to maintain position. Attempting movement during this electrical activity violates every safety protocol in the manual." But Maria was already checking her equipment and preparing for movement that would require skills developed through years of specialized training. "Sometimes the manual doesn't cover situations where soldiers' lives are at stake," she said. "I have capabilities that might make the difference between successful rescue and permanent injury for that soldier." The instructor, who had been observing Maria's responses throughout the exercise, made a decision that would change everything. "Santos," he said, his voice carrying the authority of someone with extensive special operations background, "what's your actual experience with rescue operations under hostile conditions?" Maria's response was careful but revealing. "Classified operations in Afghanistan, involving personnel recovery under conditions where conventional rescue procedures were ineffective. I can't provide details, but I have experience with situations similar to what Team Bravo is facing." The instructor studied Maria with new understanding, recognizing capabilities that suggested involvement with highly classified special operations. Her tracking skills, tactical thinking, and calm confidence under pressure indicated training and experience that went far beyond standard military protocols. Outside the cave, the storm continued to rage with unprecedented intensity. Lightning strikes were occurring continuously, and the rain had transformed the valley into a series of rushing streams that threatened to become torrential floods. Conventional wisdom dictated waiting for the weather to pass, but conventional wisdom didn't account for a soldier trapped on exposed terrain with a serious injury. Maria made her decision with the kind of calm determination that had sustained her through 3 combat deployments. "I'm moving to assess Team Bravo's situation," she announced, checking her equipment one final time. "Kim, you're with me if you're willing. Walsh, maintain communication and coordinate with base." Kim looked at the storm outside the cave, then at Maria's confident preparation for movement under impossible conditions. "What makes you think we can navigate this terrain safely when helicopters can't fly?" Maria's response revealed the depth of experience that her teammates were only beginning to understand. "Because I've done it before, under worse conditions, when soldiers' lives depended on getting rescued by someone willing to take calculated risks." As she prepared to leave the safety of the cave and venture into the storm, Maria carried with her the accumulated experience of 17 successful rescues, 3 combat deployments, and years of specialized training that had prepared her for exactly this kind of situation. The tattoo hidden beneath her sleeves represented not just memorial artwork, but a record of capabilities that were about to be tested under conditions that would reveal the true extent of her extraordinary abilities. The storm that had trapped multiple teams throughout the valley was about to become the crucible that would finally demonstrate why Maria Santos had earned the callsign compass among soldiers who understood the difference between standard military training and the exceptional capabilities required for impossible rescue operations. The moment Maria stepped outside the cave, she transformed into someone her teammates had never seen before. The driving rain and continuous lightning strikes that had forced 3 separate teams to take shelter became merely environmental factors to be calculated and managed rather than insurmountable obstacles. Her movement through the treacherous terrain was fluid and purposeful, each step placed with precision that demonstrated years of experience operating under conditions that would paralyze conventional soldiers. Kim followed behind her, struggling to match her pace while marveling at capabilities that seemed to defy standard military training. Maria navigated the storm-lashed mountainside with an intuitive understanding of terrain that allowed her to find stable footing on rain-slicked rocks and avoid areas where lightning strikes were most likely to occur. Her route selection was brilliant, utilizing natural depressions and rock formations to minimize their exposure to electrical activity while maintaining rapid progress toward Team Bravo's distress location. "How are you reading this terrain so accurately?" Kim shouted over the thunder, genuinely amazed by Maria's ability to navigate safely through conditions that had grounded helicopter operations. "It's like you have some kind of internal compass that works even when visibility is almost zero." Maria's response came without breaking stride or losing focus on the challenging route ahead. 3 years of combat search and rescue in Afghanistan teaches you to read landscapes like books, she called back. Every terrain feature tells a story about water flow, wind patterns, and geological stability. You learn to trust your instincts. When electronic systems fail, the reference to combat search and rescue represented the first concrete information Maria had shared about her previous assignments, and Kim absorbed the implications with growing understanding. If Maria had spent 3 years conducting rescue operations in Afghanistan, her capabilities went far beyond standard military training. Combat search and rescue specialists were among the most elite soldiers in the entire military, trained to locate and extract personnel under the most dangerous conditions imaginable. As they descended toward Team Bravo's position, Maria's tactical assessment proved devastatingly accurate. The injured soldier was trapped on a narrow ledge approximately 50 feet above the valley floor, with steep rock faces on 3 sides, and a dangerous drop on the 4th. The ledge was exposed to lightning activity and rain runoff that was rapidly turning the stable rock into treacherous footing. Conventional rescue equipment would be inadequate for the terrain and the weather. Conditions made standard extraction procedures impossible. Thompson's team had established a defensive perimeter around their injured teammate, but their position was increasingly untenable. The ledge was too narrow to accommodate multiple soldiers safely, and the injured private's condition was deteriorating as shock and exposure took their toll. Thompson himself looked haggard and stressed, his usual confidence replaced by the desperate uncertainty of someone facing a crisis beyond his training. "Santos," Thompson called out when he spotted Maria's approach, his voice carrying a mixture of relief and confusion. "What the hell are you doing here?" "Base ordered all teams to maintain safe positions until the weather clears." Maria ignored the question about orders and immediately began assessing the tactical situation with professional efficiency. "What's Private Johnson's condition?" she asked, studying the injured soldier's position and the access routes available for evacuation. "Has he lost consciousness? Any signs of internal bleeding or head trauma?" "Possible fracture of the left leg, definitely some kind of joint damage in the knee," Thompson replied, recognizing that Maria was asking the right medical questions. "He's conscious but showing signs of shock. We've stabilized him as much as possible, but he needs medical evacuation within the next few hours, or we're looking at permanent damage." Maria's analysis of the rescue requirements was swift and comprehensive. The injured soldier couldn't be moved safely without specialized equipment and techniques that went beyond standard first aid protocols. The terrain required rappelling skills and anchor systems that would maintain stability under adverse weather conditions. Most critically, the rescue operation needed to be completed quickly before Johnson's medical condition deteriorated beyond recovery. "Thompson," Maria said, her voice carrying unmistakable authority, "I need you to maintain communication with base and coordinate medical preparation for Johnson's arrival. Kim and I are going to establish a secure line and extract him from that ledge." Thompson's response was immediate and skeptical. "Santos, we don't have rappelling equipment for this kind of technical rescue. And even if we did, attempting rope operations during an electrical storm violates every safety protocol in the book." But Maria was already unpacking equipment from her assault pack that Thompson hadn't seen in her standard loadout. Specialized climbing hardware, medical supplies configured for trauma stabilization, and rope systems designed for rapid deployment under hostile conditions emerged with the efficiency of someone who had prepared for exactly this kind of emergency. "Where did you get that equipment?" Thompson demanded, recognizing gear that wasn't part of standard military issue. "That's specialized rescue hardware that costs thousands of dollars and requires certification to operate legally." Maria's response was matter-of-fact as she began establishing anchor points using techniques that demonstrated advanced technical training. Personal equipment purchased with deployment savings and maintained according to manufacturer specifications. "I carry specialized gear because I've been in situations where it made the difference between successful rescue and unnecessary casualties." The demonstration of technical climbing skills that followed was nothing short of extraordinary. Maria established a three-point anchor system that would maintain stability under dynamic loading, configured safety lines that provided redundant protection for both the rescuer and the casualty, and prepared medical stabilization equipment that would allow Johnson to be moved safely despite his injuries. Kim watched the preparation with growing amazement, recognizing that Maria possessed capabilities that placed her among the most elite rescue specialists in the military. Her equipment was professional-grade gear maintained to exacting standards, and her technical skills demonstrated training that went far beyond anything available through standard military channels. "Santos," Kim said, his voice carrying new respect, "what kind of specialized training did you receive in Afghanistan?" This level of technical expertise suggests assignments that go way beyond conventional search and rescue operations. Maria paused her equipment preparation to look directly at Kim, her expression serious. "Classified operations involving personnel. Recovery in hostile territory when conventional rescue procedures were ineffective or impossible. I can't provide operational details, but I can tell you that soldiers are alive today because someone was willing to attempt rescues that exceeded standard risk parameters." The revelation that Maria had been involved with classified rescue operations explained many of the mysteries that had surrounded her integration with the unit. Her reluctance to discuss previous assignments, her exceptional tactical skills, and her specialized equipment all pointed to involvement with highly classified special operations that required capabilities far beyond standard military training. Thompson, who had been listening to the exchange while monitoring Johnson's condition, found himself reevaluating his assumptions about the soldier he had dismissed as someone hiding inappropriate tattoos. "Santos," he said, his voice carrying grudging respect, "if you have the skills to extract Johnson safely, I'm willing to support your operation. But I need to understand the risk assessment and safety protocols you're implementing." Maria's response demonstrated the kind of systematic risk analysis that characterized elite military operations. Primary risk is lightning strike during rope operations, mitigated by route selection that utilizes natural electrical protection and rapid completion of exposed phases. Secondary risk is anchor failure under dynamic loading, addressed through redundant anchor systems and load distribution protocols. Medical risk to the casualty is managed through stabilization procedures that prevent additional trauma during movement. Her technical analysis was precise and comprehensive, demonstrating understanding of rescue operations that incorporated medical, environmental, and tactical considerations simultaneously. Thompson recognized that Maria was thinking several steps ahead, anticipating complications and preparing contingencies that would ensure mission success under adverse conditions. The actual rescue operation that followed showcased capabilities that bordered on the miraculous. Maria rappelled down to Johnson's position with fluid precision, her movements controlled and confident despite the continuing lightning strikes and driving rain. Her approach to the injured soldier was gentle but efficient, implementing trauma stabilization techniques that immediately improved his condition and prepared him for safe movement. "Johnson," Maria said, her voice calm and reassuring despite the dangerous conditions, "I'm going to get you off this ledge and down to safety. You're going to feel some movement and pressure as I stabilize your leg, but I need you to stay conscious and communicate with me throughout the process." The medical procedures she implemented demonstrated advanced trauma training that exceeded standard combat medic protocols. Johnson's leg was immobilized using techniques that prevented further damage while allowing safe movement through challenging terrain. Her casualty assessment was thorough and professional, identifying potential complications that could develop during evacuation and preparing appropriate countermeasures. Kim, observing from a safe position above, found himself witnessing rescue capabilities that he had never seen demonstrated outside of elite special operations units. Maria's movements were economical and purposeful, wasting no motion while maintaining absolute safety for both herself and her casualty. Her communication was clear and confident, providing reassurance to Johnson while coordinating with Thompson for the complex extraction operation. The technical climbing sequence that extracted Johnson from the ledge was executed with textbook precision. Maria had configured a complex pulley system that distributed the casualty's weight across multiple anchor points, while allowing controlled descent down the steep rock face. Her rope handling was flawless, managing multiple lines simultaneously while maintaining safety protocols that protected everyone involved in the operation. "Base, this is Team Alpha," Kim reported through his radio, his voice carrying excitement and professional admiration. "Team Bravo casualty has been successfully extracted from his position and is being prepared for ground evacuation. Medical condition appears stable, and rescue team is proceeding to designated extraction point." Park's response revealed the wider implications of Maria's successful rescue operation. "Team Alpha, outstanding work. Be advised that weather conditions are beginning to improve, and helicopter extraction will be available within 30 minutes. Medical personnel are standing by to receive the casualty upon arrival." But the radio communication also carried reports from other teams that painted a picture of widespread difficulties throughout the training area. Multiple soldiers were reporting equipment failures, navigation problems, and minor injuries that had accumulated into a significant logistical challenge for the exercise commanders. The storm had revealed weaknesses in standard training protocols and highlighted the importance of specialized capabilities for emergency operations. Thompson, who had witnessed Maria's rescue operation firsthand, found himself confronting the fundamental unfairness of his previous judgments. "Santos," he said, his voice carrying genuine remorse, "I owe you a serious apology. I made assumptions about your character and capabilities based on prejudice rather than professional assessment." Maria's response was gracious but firm as she continued monitoring Johnson's medical condition during their movement toward the extraction point. "The important thing is that Johnson is safe and will make a full recovery. Personal conflicts shouldn't interfere with mission accomplishment or soldier welfare." But Thompson wasn't finished with his reassessment of the soldier he had wrongfully dismissed. "The tattoo controversy was my fault," he continued, his voice carrying the weight of genuine recognition. "I let prejudice override professional judgment, and I influenced other unit members based on assumptions rather than evidence." The conversation was interrupted by another emergency radio transmission that would reveal the full extent of Maria's extraordinary capabilities. Team Charlie, led by Rodriguez, was reporting a crisis that exceeded their ability to manage independently. 2 soldiers from their team had become separated during the storm and were lost somewhere in the vast wilderness area with minimal supplies and compromised communication equipment. "Base, this is Team Charlie," Rodriguez's voice carried obvious stress and concern. "We have 2 personnel missing for over 3 hours with no radio contact. Last known position was grid coordinates 285 to 746. But they could have moved significant distance in any direction. Request immediate search and rescue support." Park's response revealed the limitations of conventional search procedures under current conditions. "Team Charlie, search and rescue assets are committed to medical evacuation and weather-related emergencies. Maintain your current position and continue attempting radio contact with missing personnel." Maria listened to the emergency traffic with growing concern, recognizing a situation where her specialized tracking abilities could mean the difference between successful recovery and potential tragedy. 2 soldiers lost in mountainous wilderness during severe weather represented a life-threatening emergency that required immediate action. "Base, this is Santos with Team Alpha," Maria transmitted, using her personal callsign for the first time. During the exercise, request permission to conduct search operations for Team Charlie's missing personnel. I have specialized tracking capabilities and equipment that may be effective under current conditions. Park's response was hesitant, but interested. Santos, explain your specialized capabilities and proposed search methodology. Maria's reply revealed the depth of experience that had made her legendary among soldiers who understood the difference between standard military training and exceptional professional capabilities. Combat search and rescue specialist with 3 years experience in Afghanistan. Advanced tracking certification, specialized navigation equipment, and proven success rate in personnel recovery operations under hostile conditions. The radio silence that followed Maria's transmission stretched for nearly 30 seconds before Park responded with obvious interest. Santos, you're claiming combat search and rescue experience? That's a highly specialized field with extensive training requirements and security clearances. Affirmative, sir, Maria replied. Classified operations with the 75th Ranger Regiment involving personnel recovery in denied territory. I can provide verification through appropriate channels, but immediate action may be required to prevent casualties among Team Charlie's missing personnel. Thompson and Kim exchanged glances that reflected their growing understanding of Maria's true background. Combat search and rescue specialists were among the most elite soldiers in the entire military, trained to locate and extract personnel under conditions where conventional rescue operations were impossible. If Maria possessed these credentials, her previous assignments had involved operations at the highest levels of military special operations. Park's decision reflected the critical nature of the developing emergency. Santos, you have authorization to conduct search operations for missing personnel. Coordinate with Team Charlie for last known positions and movement patterns. All available assets will support your operation. The search operation that followed demonstrated capabilities that seemed almost supernatural to observers who hadn't witnessed elite tracking specialists in action. Maria could read terrain disturbances that were invisible to conventional searchers, identify human passage through wilderness areas hours after the fact, and predict movement patterns based on psychological assessment of lost personnel under stress. Her analysis of the missing soldiers' situation was swift and accurate. 2 personnel with limited survival training, probably moving together for mutual support, seeking shelter and high ground for potential radio contact with rescue teams. Movement pattern will follow natural terrain features that provide protection from weather while maintaining visibility for potential rescue aircraft. The psychological profile she constructed proved devastatingly accurate as she led the combined rescue team through increasingly remote terrain toward areas that conventional search procedures would never have considered. Her route selection was brilliant, anticipating the decision-making process of lost soldiers while accounting for weather conditions and terrain limitations that would influence their movement. The breakthrough came when Maria detected subtle signs that the missing soldiers had established a temporary shelter in a location that provided both protection from the storm and visibility for potential rescue operations. Her analysis of the site revealed that the soldiers had implemented basic survival procedures, but were probably suffering from exposure and dehydration that could become life-threatening if rescue was delayed. "Base, this is Santos," she transmitted, with quiet confidence. "I have located signs of recent habitation that match the profile of our missing personnel. Proceeding to investigate shelter location approximately 200 meters from current position." The successful location of the missing soldiers represented a triumph of specialized training and experience over conventional search procedures. Both soldiers were conscious and mobile, but suffering from exposure and minor injuries that required immediate medical attention. Their relief at being found was overwhelming, and their gratitude toward Maria was expressed with the emotional intensity of people who understood they had been rescued from a potentially life-threatening situation. Rodriguez, who had spent hours searching unsuccessfully for his missing team members, approached Maria with an expression that mixed professional admiration with personal remorse. "Santos," he said, his voice carrying genuine emotion, "you saved 2 soldiers' lives today. I don't know how to thank you for capabilities that went far beyond anything we had a right to expect." But Maria's response was characteristically modest as she coordinated medical care for the rescued soldiers. "This is what search and rescue specialists do," she said simply. "Soldiers don't get left behind when specialized capabilities can make the difference." The helicopter extraction that followed brought all teams back to base safely, but the debriefing that ensued would reveal the full extent of Maria's extraordinary military background. Park had used the flight time to verify Maria's credentials through classified military databases, and what he discovered transformed his understanding of the soldier who had been dismissed by her own unit based on prejudice about her tattoos. "Ladies and gentlemen," Park announced to the assembled unit members, his voice carrying unmistakable pride and authority, "I want to share some information about Staff Sergeant Santos that security classifications prevented me from revealing during her initial integration with this unit." The silence in the briefing room was absolute as unit members absorbed the implications of Park's announcement. Thompson and Rodriguez exchanged glances that reflected their growing understanding that their prejudices had led them to misjudge someone whose capabilities far exceeded their own. Staff Sergeant Santos is a decorated combat search and rescue specialist who served 3 tours in Afghanistan with the 75th Ranger Regiment. Park continued, his voice carrying the weight of professional respect. Her official record includes 17 successful personnel recovery operations in hostile territory, 2 Bronze Stars for valor, and a Purple Heart for wounds received during rescue operations. The revelation that Maria was a decorated war hero whose combat record exceeded that of any other unit member created a profound silence that reflected the magnitude of the misjudgment that had occurred. Thompson felt physically sick as he realized that his prejudice had led him to attack someone whose service record represented the highest ideals of military professionalism. Her callsign in Afghanistan was Compass, Park continued, because she could locate lost personnel when conventional search procedures failed. She has saved the lives of soldiers who would otherwise have been classified as casualties, and her specialized capabilities represent exactly the kind of expertise this unit was designed to incorporate. Rodriguez found himself confronting the devastating reality that his assumptions about Maria's character had been completely wrong. The soldier he had accused of hiding inappropriate tattoos was actually a decorated war hero whose service record represented achievements that he could never hope to match. But the most profound revelation was yet to come. Park had saved the most significant information for last, information that would explain Maria's reluctance to discuss her tattoo and her previous assignments. The tattoo that generated so much controversy, Park said, his voice carrying deep respect, is a memorial piece honoring the 17 soldiers whose lives Santos saved during her combat deployments. Each element of the artwork represents a specific rescue operation, with coordinates and dates that commemorate soldiers who came home alive because of her courage and expertise. The silence that followed this revelation was broken only by the sound of Thompson's sharp intake of breath as the full magnitude of his misjudgment became clear. The tattoo he had dismissed as inappropriate gang artwork was actually a sacred memorial to fallen and rescued soldiers, a permanent tribute to the most meaningful experiences of Maria's military career. Furthermore, Park continued, the financial investment represented by this memorial artwork came from Santos's own deployment savings. She spent $8,000 of her own money to create a permanent tribute to soldiers whose lives she considered more valuable than her own financial security. Kim felt tears forming in his eyes as he realized that Maria's reluctance to reveal her tattoo hadn't been based on shame or inappropriate imagery, but on respect for the privacy of the soldiers it honored and the classified nature of the operations it commemorated. The reason Santos couldn't discuss the details of her previous assignments, Park concluded, is that her rescue operations involved classified special operations that remain sensitive due to ongoing security considerations. Her discretion about these matters represents exactly the kind of professional judgment and security awareness that this unit requires. Thompson stood slowly, his face pale with the recognition of how profoundly he had misjudged someone whose service record represented everything he claimed to respect about military professionalism. "Sir," he said, his voice shaking with emotion, "I need to make a formal apology to Staff Sergeant Santos for conduct that was completely unprofessional and based on prejudice rather than fact." But Maria's response demonstrated the grace and professionalism that had characterized her entire military career. "Sergeant Thompson," she said, her voice calm and without accusation, "misunderstandings happen in military units. What matters is that we learn to work together effectively when soldiers' lives were at stake." Rodriguez joined Thompson in approaching Maria with expressions that mixed professional respect with personal shame. "Santos," he said, his voice carrying genuine remorse, "we judged you based on assumptions rather than evidence. Your service record represents achievements that none of us can match, and your tattoo honors fallen soldiers in ways that deserve our respect rather than our criticism." The transformation in unit dynamics was immediate and profound. Soldiers who had questioned Maria's integrity were now seeking opportunities to learn from someone whose expertise could enhance their own capabilities. The mysterious tattoo that had generated suspicion was now understood as a sacred memorial that represented the highest ideals of military service. Walsh, who had remained largely neutral during the controversy, approached Maria with obvious admiration. "Santos," she said, "would you be willing to share some of your search and rescue techniques with the unit? Your capabilities demonstrated today could benefit all of us in future operations." Maria's response was characteristically generous, as she prepared to integrate fully with a unit that had finally recognized her true value. "I'd be honored to share whatever knowledge might help our team become more effective," she said. "Combat search and rescue techniques can be adapted for training scenarios that will improve everyone's capabilities." The debriefing concluded with Park's announcement that Maria would serve as the unit's senior search and rescue specialist, a position that recognized her exceptional qualifications and provided her with the authority to implement training programs that would enhance the entire team's capabilities. But the most meaningful moment came when Thompson privately approached Maria with a request that reflected his complete transformation in understanding her character and capabilities. "Santos," he said, his voice carrying humble respect, "would you be willing to tell me about the soldiers your tattoo honors? I'd like to understand the stories behind the memorial artwork that I so wrongly criticized." Maria's response revealed the depth of meaning that her tattoo represented and the profound experiences that had shaped her military career. Each element represents a specific soldier whose life was saved during rescue operations in Afghanistan, she said, carefully rolling up her sleeve to reveal the intricate artwork that told the story of 17 successful rescues. The phoenix represents renewal and second chances. The coordinates mark locations where conventional rescue procedures failed, but specialized techniques succeeded. The dog tags bear the names of soldiers who came home to their families because someone was willing to attempt rescues that exceeded standard risk parameters. Thompson studied the detailed artwork with new understanding, recognizing the profound meaning behind every line and shadow of the memorial piece. "This isn't just a tattoo," he said, his voice filled with respect. "It's a permanent tribute to the most meaningful experiences of your military career." "It represents the reason I became a soldier," Maria replied. "To ensure that no one gets left behind when specialized capabilities can make the difference between life and death." The unit that had once questioned Maria's integrity now understood that they were serving alongside someone whose dedication to saving soldiers' lives represented the highest ideals of military service. Her mysterious tattoo had been revealed as a sacred memorial, and her classified background had been exposed as a record of extraordinary achievements under the most challenging conditions imaginable. 6 months later, when the unit was deployed for actual combat operations, Maria's capabilities would save additional lives and earn her the respect of soldiers throughout the special operations community. The tattoo that had once generated suspicion became a symbol of hope for soldiers who understood that someone with exceptional skills was watching over them. The insurance money mentioned in the unit's initial gossip turned out to be a veterans' benefit fund that Maria had established using her deployment savings, providing financial assistance for families of soldiers killed or wounded during rescue operations. Her commitment to honoring fallen soldiers extended beyond memorial artwork to practical support for the families they left behind. Thompson, who had once questioned Maria's integrity, became her most vocal advocate within the military community. "Santos taught me that judging soldiers based on appearances rather than capabilities represents the worst kind of military prejudice," he would later tell other units. Her tattoo tells the story of 17 soldiers who came home alive because someone possessed the skills and courage to attempt impossible rescues. The story of Maria Santos and her memorial tattoo became legendary within the special operations community, representing the importance of looking beyond surface appearances to recognize true professional capability and dedication. Her unit evolved into one of the most effective search and rescue teams in military history, saving countless lives through the application of techniques that Maria had developed during her combat deployments. But for Maria herself, the greatest satisfaction came from knowing that soldiers would continue to come home safely because specialized training and equipment were available when conventional procedures failed. Her tattoo would continue to honor fallen soldiers while serving as a reminder that someone with exceptional capabilities was always ready to attempt rescues that others considered impossible. The phoenix rising from flames had found its perfect home among soldiers who understood that second chances in life often depend on someone else's willingness to risk everything for the sake of bringing people home safely. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.